We'll try. And we are live and on time. So this is Vlog Thursday, and we're going to talk. I have a couple guests. This is number 257. I have a couple guests here. Jason, and I want to call you Jason the Cookie Monster Slagle because that's what it says in Slack. I don't know why, but we're fine with that. And Ray, who's been on the channel before, but I needed some subject matter experts for this. And these guys are always fun to talk to. We have a lot of group discussions on things. And boy, there was a long thread on tech burnout. And it is in direct relation to the whole Log4j and all the other vulnerabilities. And, that's, I don't even know where to start with it, but Jason is a fellow MSP. Just if anyone's wanting to connect with him, I've left a link to his company. I've left a link to his LinkedIn. Same with Ray. Ray's kind of a former MSP, trying to be a fully former MSP, I think we describe it. And Ray runs OIT VoIP. And
doing my best.
Definitely, we're all people involved in this industry, but we wanted to have a group discussion just about this topic. Because I do a lot of videos on, getting people started in IT. We have my home lab show. It's all, and I engage with so many people that, hey, I want to get a career in IT. We're going to maybe discourage a couple of you. Maybe. At least we're going to be realistic here about it. So that's I think a really important aspect is that it can be a little bit of a stressful job. And I did put a disclaimer in the description. We are not at all mental health professionals. We're all tech professionals. If you feel more stress over this topic or goes beyond the scope of this, there's a few links I left down below to deal directly with mental health resources, because it's tough for some people in here. And if you feel like more than just rage quitting your job, something more beyond that, then there's some links down below. We're just going to, like I say, we're going to keep it focused on tech. And yes, someone has already commented that there's some beards in here, and Jason's definitely the winner on the beards. So.
Yeah, it just kind of happened. This is No Shave November 2020 edition.
Yeah, it's kind of like how the pandemic started, never ended. Is No Shave November one day, and then here we all are.
Like, that's the amazing part. Like, he has No Shave November 2020. This is me like working on it for like 3 years at least. Yeah. So Jason sneezes and he's like Papa Smurf. He's like, bam. He's like,
yeah, that's I don't know if I'm jealous or not, because I like how little care it takes. I just kind of quit shaving a few months ago too, and this is as far as it grows. It doesn't go any further.
Yeah, so I've not actually really done much with it. It's been trimmed once. I trim it to keep it out of my mouth, and I trim where it doesn't grow in fully. And this is like just the default, right? This is if I don't touch it for a year other than one trim, this is what it looks like. So it needs trimmed. I got to go get it trimmed.
Every new CVE that's 9.0 plus, Jason's beard goes another inch. There we go.
That's a good one.
Go ahead though, Jason. Let's start with you in the intro. Tell people a little bit of your background and how you got to where you're at.
Yeah, so I mean, we're a MSP in Toledo, Ohio area, but I mean, it's been like a long and winding road to get here. We were an ISP. I left, kind of spent some time in Linux, Unix administration for a couple enterprises, ended up at a startup, finally came back, and we just kind of pivoted a couple years ago from being more like a boutique consulting firm to trying to, chase that recurring revenue and moving more to an MSP model. So I've been doing security. I was actually laughing. I've got up there on that shelf the 5th edition of the CISSP book. That's how long I've been like, I should go get that. It's been like at least 10 years that I should go get my CISSP. So yeah, I've been doing this for a bit.
Cool. So, and you're also, I know, a Linux enthusiast, and you're also like me, hang out with some of the Huntress folks and jump on cybersecurity issues and discuss them, and maybe write some code here and there and patch a few things. So, well-rounded in that space.
I've worn almost every hat in IT at this point. So from SAN administrator to Linux guy, I've never been a Windows admin.
You're not missing much.
No.
I started as a Windows admin and went to Linux, and I'm happy there. Like, if people ask, how do you run an MSP if you're not a Windows admin? I was like, it's really easy. I hired some smart people. Because I mean, I can muddle my way through some Active Directory and I understand a lot of the concepts, but man, it's just once you really get deep into Linux, it's a happier place, I think. So
I've been using
Log4j,
Yeah, I've been using Linux since before Windows 95 came out. I started with Slackware 1.1 when I was like 14 years old. So it was like kernel version like 0.99.3 or something like that. So it's been a bit.
I failed Slackware. I tried. I never got into it. I always, it was never. Then I Red Hat. I had I think it was, how many is it? 5 floppy disks for Red Hat.
Yeah.
The first one that came out. So that's where I got my start. But what about you, Ray? Were you a Linux? Because you've been a lot of network engineering background, obviously, and VoIP
Yeah.
systems. But what else?
Yeah. So I begrudgingly went into Linux, typical Windows admin network guy. So, but can't count that for anything. A ton of network ops. But because I did a lot of on-prem PBXs, VoIP PBXs, Elastic, Asterisk, all that stuff, I had to get really comfortable with like Debian, CentOS, the RHEL derivatives, and then today we run tons of Ubuntu. So that's my happy place. Now I'm more comfortable there than I am in Windows most of the day. So
Yeah, and you still keep your network engineering skills sharp, managing VoIP systems and stuff like that too. So me and you did a couple of videos you can find on my channel about the attacks on VoIP systems and what had to be done to mitigate that. That's a fun, complicated topic. And I imagine those people, I think the debrief on it finally, people pretty much were up 24/7 sorting that out, trying to make voice system, trying to make phones ring.
that was the craziness, because like these were major enterprises. I mean, we were talking about like some of the names that were backing these people up were had significant resources and absolutely had DR plans and everything go, and it still took them by storm. And it wasn't even like, and that's like one of the things I wanted to talk about with, like, on the tech burnouts. I was like, you have to be comfortable with the fact that no matter what you do, it's going to hit the fan. I mean,
Yeah.
you can plan for the best, but you have to understand, even despite your best plans, some stuff is going to go sideways. And if you haven't been burnt out between the Kaseya and Heartbleed and the VoIPing, which is what we're calling all the VoIP attacks, and Log4j and all the other 15,000 things this year, you haven't been paying attention. So.
Yeah, and we're seeing it now. The cascading failures of it went wrong at Amazon, and it was kind of crazy reading the debrief. I mean, we've now built systems that are so scalable. It's crazy, but it's also when something goes wrong, the compounding effects, like a ripple goes across, and a tsunami shutting down servers. I mean, we had 2 AWS outages within about 7 days of each other, roughly.
There was another one yesterday.
I'm blaming Jason for that, because Jason says all year long, friends don't let friends put them go on AWS East. And a week later, AWS West goes down.
Yeah, that is true. And it's funny because we're in US West 2. Like all the resources I run are in US West 2, and it's been very reliable. And then the network at US West 2 just dies for, that was at least a pretty short outage.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's certainly it all is leading up to the discussion of today is the hair on fire things on that. And I'll let Jason lead on that, because I think he has a video he posted on his channel talking about this as well. Just go ahead, and what's your thoughts on the hairs on fire problem we have sometimes in cybersecurity?
I mean, it's difficult, right? So there are certainly instances we have where the hair should be on fire, right? And I feel like Log4j is actually honestly one of them, right? Like this is an incident that I was trying to think of when the last one of those came out that was like that. Probably Shell Shock, right? Like we can go back, and that was what, 2014, right? So we're talking 6-7 years that we have a vulnerability that's in like a core piece of functionality that is accidentally included in a bunch of other things, right? So we'll call it core service, and it very much warranted a lot of the attention we gave it, right? And from security people, as a guy that kind of plays, as I was joking with somebody the other day, as a guy that kind of sits in this weird world where like I do security stuff and we're an MSP, but I also speak to a lot of other MSPs via vendors and stuff. And because we're an MSP, I have to speak to small, medium businesses, right? It's really hard kind of to balance that, because the security vendors and the security people are for sure always going to be up in arms when there's a huge security issue, right? And I think part of the problem we have right now is the MSP community is watching the security experts. And when the security experts get all wound up, the MSPs are getting all wound up. And that's probably not the reaction that you want to take, because not every single vulnerability is earth shattering to an MSP. And the one that came out yesterday, the 2021 44790, the Apache one, right?
Yeah,
like
Apache
it's like
Lua.
Apache Lua.
yeah, we're sitting there and everyone's getting all worked up. I see that that tired meme of the train hitting the bus
That's my
pops
fault.
up, and it's like, oh, was it you? I'm
Blame
like,
me.
oh my god, here we go again. And I look at it and I'm like, yeah, this is a CVSS 9.8, right? But this is a non-event, right? Like, and it's like the last thing we need is MSPs right before Christmas to run around with their hair on fire, going, oh my god, everywhere I run Apache, I have to patch it. I'm like, this is we have to figure out a happy balance there, or it's crazy.
My favorite is Tom sent me that same meme 3 times, and I think it had like it had log4j 214, 215, 216
Yeah.
over and over again.
Yeah, it is the Log4j I think is legit. The other one, at first I seen and this is me overreacting to, I want to say bleeping computer, because they said vulnerability 9.8 found in Apache. By the way, it's Lua. Like, there's this little, you got to read the detail. And by the way, Lua is not popular. Even me, I think I had asked him on the Slack forums, like, is there even, I mean, there's lots of things written in Lua, but is there any functionality that's really popular where Lua has been turned on? So it's a mod for Apache that's disabled by default. I mean, and it wasn't enabled on any of the servers we had. And I'm like,
Lua too, though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
but that's not Apache. Yeah.
Right. And that's the trick, right? Like, what do you do? And I think that's the problem with this Log4j stuff, right? If it was like, if it was look for this package, look for this software, look for this thing, but we're talking about stuff buried inside other softwares, right? It's not just does it have Apache, it's now does Apache have the Lua mod? It's not do you have Java, it's just do you have Java and is it using Log4j and is it the affected version if you can find it?
Yeah.
And that's the scary part.
Yeah, and because it specifically had to be, Apache with mod enabled, these circumstances had to be met before you could even potentially exploit it. So if all those circumstances are met, yes, it's a 9.8, but by default, none of those circumstances are met. And so it really was kind of a non-issue. We can go to sleep on it, so to an extent.
Well, CVSS actually it controls for that, right? And so there's a couple of different parts of the CVSS score, and one of them is like the environmental score, and that is intended to talk about how widespread environmentally this is. And no one ever posts that. They always post the base score.
Yeah.
And the base score is always the sky is falling.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you were able to get to the analysis, and we had
I saw the thing you posted.
Yeah, there's a couple of things where you can look at some of what's trending on there, and I haven't really had time to play with it to come up with, are the scores averaging up over time, over years? Is there things like that? But it's definitely once everything's an emergency, nothing's an emergency is also what we're almost getting to.
And that's the scary part, right? Like it gets to the point where like the MSPs, and that's where the burnout happens, that you don't even know what to be scared because, and that's what I've always tried to like put on my technicians and my support teams, whether it was MSP, whether it was VoIP or whatever. But it was when you're talking to the client, you can't talk to them like the world is going to end. If they say, I have this problem, you're like, oh my gosh, that's got to be horrible. Like they're going to freak out. And, I'll give Jason, I gave him a lot of hard time this past week. And I was like, when the security, I did. I said, this is to be fair, I also blame John Hammond and Wes Spencer, which none of them deserved it either. But the point was like, appropriately, the security community is addressing and bringing up these things, and you have the media going nuts. And then the MSPs are like the client in that doctor relationship, where the MSPs are not the ones that are the experts on what's going on. You know what I mean? So they don't know what's going on. And what was the response? The response you always get from a security researcher when something happens and you say, well, should I be scared? Is it depends.
It depends. 100%. Because it does depend.
It doesn't help anybody.
It doesn't. And that's why we've been talking about actionable steps instead, right? Like instead of saying, if the doctor says, oh, you're screwed, you know what I mean? Or, we don't know, we'll see. That's one thing. If they say, okay, here's the regimen we're going to go after, here's the things you're going to look at. And I'm not putting it all on the security researcher. This is planning MSPs can do. It prevents the tech burnout, because otherwise, if everything is, it depends, you don't know how to resolve it, you're SOL. Absolutely.
But I harken back to like a lawyer, right? If you just casually ask a lawyer something, they're gonna everything they say, maybe they'll tell you something, but they're going to preface it with this is not legal advice. And if you talk to a doctor outside of the doctor realm, they're going to tell you this is not medical advice, right? At some point or another, there's professional liability that we're attempting to like. If I tell you it's not a big deal and you get popped by it, what's my liability look like there, right? So I think that's where some of the it depends comes from.
So can I give you so my counterpoint to that, and keep in mind, all three of us are good friends. It's not
We're all friends.
You know what I mean? But the three of us are all public figures, right? We all have a lot of stuff that we put out online, and I completely get where you're coming from, Jason. My problem is that if you're not comfortable giving advice, don't give advice online. Don't get in front of a camera and say, this is what's going on. If you can't qualify it with a response, it's just adding. And I'm not saying you because you were one of the heroes. You know what I mean? All heroes don't wear capes. Some have giant beards. You know, you were one of the heroes along with Huntress that, you know, go out and put out information and help build the scanners. And the scanners that were so nice that, you know, some other major corporations copied it without attribution. But like you were, you know what I mean? So it's, I'm not trying to
on trends.
Yeah, you know, but could you imagine if like the answer on the scanners was like, it depends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So some of it from my perspective comes down to like which audience for me in particular, and I can't speak to the general industry. For me, it depends on what audience I'm talking to, right? Because the things I'm going to say to a security audience are different than the things I'm going to say to an MSP audience, which are different than the things I'm going to say to an SMB, right? So maybe we need to be better, those of us that play in all three realms. And I think the people you mentioned there, of all three of us, for sure play in all of those realms, right? Like it's maybe John and Wes aren't directly talking to SMBs, right? But all three of us play in the world where we're talking to security researchers and we're talking to MSPs. So maybe we need to be better about qualifying who the audience is. Because from a security,
some of my videos too, it's like who is this for? I've said that a couple times, and I probably should say it all the time, is especially on the security topic. It's probably not a bad idea. Who is this for? Who is the target audience for the information I'm about to spew? Because I think that does, like you said, it adds a lot of context to it, because I would never tell my clients don't really know what Log4j is, and nor should they care. Are you patching whatever thing is allegedly on fire, Tom? Cool, we're happy.
And that's what one of the things I love hearing, like it depends, is kind of like my soapbox thing, right?
Trigger.
Like, and you're absolutely right. Right. I have a couple soapboxes. I may have to talk to the soapbox manufacturers, but like one of the things I talk to, like when you talk to a salesperson, you're like, you know, oh, well, give me this, and we're working on a process. As IT professionals, how many times have we said, okay, well, let's walk through your process, and the client says, well, it depends. And we put our engineer hat on and we say, okay, well, let's whiteboard this out. And if you can break it down into individual pieces with actionable steps, that's the engineer's job, right? And that's what we're supposed to do. And that's why I say I think that when you say qualify the question, right? Like, yes, the audience has to be, you know, as a security researcher, and I'm not a security expert. Absolutely. I'm a network engineer with the CEO hat on. But so when I listen to these guys talk, I have my pen and paper, and a lot of times I go back, and Jason was the first guy when, you know, we got the announcement from the ISAO about the Log4j. Jason was the first guy. Within minutes, I'm like, can you evaluate my systems real quick, please? You know, and he did me the favor of logging in, and we had an announcement going out within an hour. But as the engineer side, we can approach these things and say, okay, well, we need to have a software assessment. We need to know what we have, what versions we have. And this is all in your RMM or whatever you're using for monitoring. These are the software packages we have. What can we live without for a week? What can we live without for a day? What if there's a vulnerability in this? Do we have to leave it on because we'll take the Sony approach and leave it and pay out whatever we got to pay out after the fact? But leaving it on is less critical than being without business. And the MSP that's not a security expert can do that. So that when there is a breach, you can say, okay, these are the category of we're good, leave it alone. These are the category of we got to shut down. These are in the category of we can afford to nuke and pave. And these are the category of we'll see what happens. You know what I mean? And that's ubiquitous. That is absolutely, you can say, applies to everybody.
Well, after you beat me, I actually did give like a checklist. Like here is the flow chart I would follow, right? Like in this, I will say this generally out to an MSP audience, right? Like when something like this comes out, right? Like for step one, is it internet accessible, right? So if you have a vulnerability that can be hit and triggered via the internet, you need to patch or shut down immediately because you have hours, if not days,
Right.
right? Like days or hours, right? Thing number two, can it be triggered externally accidentally, right? So let's say you consume data from somewhere else and you import it like in a batch process. If you can trigger it via that, right, you need to stop doing that or patch before you can do it, right? Number three is regulated industry, right? Because the risk you're exposed to is a function of how likely you are to get popped and how much it's going to cost if you are, right? In a regulated industry, it's going to cost a lot, even if the likelihood's no. So you patch those. And then after that, it's like, well, you know, I can probably catch it in detection and I can wait for the vendor patch and live without it, right? So that would be the general advice I would give in all cases here.
And that's completely reasonable, right? Like Jonathan's asking, you know, with big alerts like Log4j, or actually I'm reading the wrong one. He's saying, you know, how do you balance urgency without wanting to rush, waiting to have a measured response? And the answer is, I think, what Jason just said. You know what I mean? It's, you know, balance the stuff out. I think priority one is, and all MSPs or IT professionals, whatever, should do this, have the person that's going to be in charge of when a vulnerability gets announced or some security incident gets announced or any item of interest comes across your table. This is the person that's going to go review first. They're going to go look at the real write-up. They're going to go look at exposure. They're going to go look at what the details are and determine a game plan for scoping it out. And then you can determine a game plan for going against your clients. And like you said, because they always go with the base score, right? They don't go against, you know, it's a 9.8. It's not remotely exploitable, but it's a 9.8. And it only affects people with Tamagotchi watches. Like, you know, whatever.
I feel singled out.
You know, yes, I'm old. But, you know, but that kind of stuff, you can do that in advance. And there's going to be the stuff where you say, hey, we have to shut down. And that's part of your BDR strategy anyway. Is how long can we be down? How long does it take to get back up? How far back of data can we lose? Right? RPO, RTO. These are standard things, right? And it's the same thing here.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I didn't hear you say the words, but you should have. Threat modeling. You build all your threat models, you get these understanding on this. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, but you just have to have an understanding, and hopefully not the day Log4j came out before, but you should have something in writing and play these out through your head. Play them out if you had this, and you know, could you live without this software for 1 day, 2 days? What is the risk factor? What does it look to restore? This is something you should always be taking some time, walking through your DR plan and making sure you've thought about it, because it's really hard if you haven't thought about it at all when an incident happens. It's hard enough when you have what you think is a great plan. It's still kind of nervous going through it, going, all right, that server literally burst into flames. That worst case scenario is here. And how do we walk it back? How do we start restoring it? You hopefully have got some of that thought process ahead of time that you've gone through. There's plenty of templates out there, so many free resources. If you just Google it a little bit, you'll find to start. I'm trying to remember the name. There's a couple sites I remember to have. I think is it part of CISA? They have some templates you can download that walk you through it. I think SANS has a few of them. There's so many.
Has one.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of other MSP resources too that are available for IR plans and stuff like that. And tabletop. You popped it up there.
Mm-hmm. I think that threat modeling was Jason's response that actually set me off on the edge for the. It
100% was. I said, dude, you got a threat model, and you're like, that doesn't help me.
I don't know what that means. No, I do know what it means, but like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
but if you're an MSP, you should know what that means, right? Like, that's, I don't know. If you're an SMB, I'll forgive it. But if you're in 2020, in 2021, and 2022, if you're an MSP and you don't understand security enough that you don't know what the word threat model means, I might suggest you're in the wrong industry. I'm just gonna say,
you know, I don't disagree. There's, but there's different levels of operational maturity, business maturity for MSPs. It's very easy to say, like, that's the whole fire the client because they don't know what the hell they're doing kind of thing. As MSPs, we've taken, I should really stop saying we, but I still consider myself an MSP. As MSPs, we've taken the onus of protecting the client. If you've taken their revenue, you have a responsibility to do it. Yes. As experts, and again, the experts that get in front of the mic, in front of the camera, put out stuff on LinkedIn, put out stuff on Medium, they're doing stuff out there. If you're going to educate, you got to educate. It can't be, I'm only going to educate the people that understand me. because that's not education, right? If we're gonna, and Huntress does an awesome job, and you've done enough of these with Huntress, right? With amazing jobs with Huntress doing those. Huntress has tabletops out. Jonathan has tabletops out with Ninja One, Ninja RMM. If you go back and Google, we did the Jurassic Sock stuff, we did the Rogue One stuff. The information's out there, and yes, MSPs have to be educated, but I think each of those has a place where we do it in different fashions so that people can consume it at the level they're ready to consume it at. You get what I'm saying?
So I'll take that. I mean, but it's not like you can't figure out if I come onto a webinar and I tell you that you need to do threat modeling and you don't know what threat modeling means and you're an MSP, it's one Google search away. Right.
So you want to hear a funny story about that? So you guys know I'm and I'm sure the audience knows I'm one of the mods on Reddit on RMSP, have been for a very long time. Somebody posted today, I'm not going to call him out, but somebody posted today, said he has a couple hundred clients. He has 25 to 30 remote desktop clients because everybody's working from home now and they're using RDP to get there. He did have it secured with Duo MFA, but he said, he or she, I don't know, they said they wanted a way to make it more secure. They understand RDP is inherently insecure. They wanted to know if there was a remote desktop gateway type thing, which anybody that's done this for 30 seconds knows. You Google remote desktop gateway and that's a thing. You know what I mean? So like it was in the post. And Kelvin Tahlar, Everett Cyber Drain, Lime Networks, another great person to follow if you want to educate yourself. He wrote this really nice post explaining things. And I went back to Kelvin. I'm like, wow, like, because my hair was on fire trying to respond in the nicest way possible, and I was struggling because it's like, you have the answer, you just got to Google what you said. And Kelvin was nice enough to put in those words, and I get it. I've been on the other side where you're like, that's such an obvious thing, but at the same time, we took that job of getting in front of the camera. We got to be comfortable with explaining it.
Those are the ones where I would post a "let me Google that for you" link in some Facebook group, and I'd get ripped up for it. So
that exists for a reason.
Yeah, it does.
And let me just tell you, I mean, you both know my wife. Sending your wife a "let me Google that for you" link is not a bright idea.
Oh, I know all about that.
Yeah, I've sent a few of those to her too. She's never pleased.
Yeah, I mean, but that's kind of the thing, right? Like we gotta, in that. That's why I wanted to have this conversation, because Jason and Tom are usually the guys that are saying, this is going out. Like Tom, you did a Log4j, you did a couple Log4j videos, right? Jason, it was funny, Jason yesterday, I should probably post something. We were talking about making a video, and Jason posted something, right away. And I thought that was really awesome. But yeah, I mean, scoping it out, right? Like one of the things we do this year, we started like Q4 of this year, is, everybody knows me because I have my documentation. I'm the documentation guy. I have thousands of documents in our KB. But we started scoping them now, where this is the intended audience. And I think Jason hit the nail on the head when we talk and say, this is this, maybe saying this is the intended audience. If this is below your knowledge or your skill set, reach out to your IT professional or reach out to these resources, right? Like, Tom put the link, the backdoors and breaches link there. We talked about the other tabletops. I think we can do a better job at doing that, so MSPs aren't just seeing a bunch of links and saying, and internal IT, corp IT aren't seeing these things and saying, oh, damn. Especially with Christmas Eve coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I tried to be reasonably clear on the Log4j. For day one, we knew it was bad. It was still being triaged to really determine. We seen the score, but is it really this bad? Oh man, it kind of was. But it's also, that is more the exception than the rule, because the next one we have to go back quite a few years before we mention something like Shell Shock. And what was it? The other ones, was it Poodle? How wasn't that before that?
So Poodle, Poodle was just SSL bypass. So.
Poodle and Shell Shock and Heartbleed had amazing names and amazing logos, and Log4j, Log4Shell. Like, I feel we could have done better.
That paint logo was amazing.
Gossi did it. Gossi the dog did it, man. That's my favorite version of the logo of that one. But I tried to keep it brief because there was, from my audience, and something I've talked a lot about is UniFi. And I actually was in talking directly to the people at UniFi on their security team, and they right away knew it was a problem because of the way they processed it. So they were within 24 hours. I think about 12 hours, they had a patch out, which is great. And I made sure I did a video on that. They had another patch that was a follow up, but it took almost 2 days before someone actually could weaponize it. They haven't disclosed how, but someone did figure out a way to completely specifically attack a UniFi controller based on public ports being open.
I could 100% do it.
Yeah, Jason could definitely do it as well. I seen some of Jason's work, so it wasn't weaponized on day one, but it was important to have it patched on day one because Jason, by day 2 of not sleeping and untold amounts of caffeine, I'm sure Jason's like, oh, I can do this.
It's one of the, so, this came out and it's like at first we didn't realize it was limited to Log4j2, which, this is like the one time in history where you're going to be able to say, hey, I'm using end of life software and it saved me. A lot of these packages are still using like Log4j1, right? And so I'm running around going, so VMware, VCSA is totally Java, right? It almost 100%, right? Basically, you can assume if it's Java, there's like a 75% chance it's using Log4j, right? Because you're using Log4j, Logback, or Apache Commons logging, right? It's going to be one of the three, and I think the thing that limited some of the exposure here was that a lot of places are still using Log4j1 too.
Yeah. Well,
what'd you call it, Tom? Security through what?
Security through antiquity. My friend works for a pretty big place, and he says we're so safe because of security through antiquity. Yeah. I'm like, aren't you open to everything else? He goes, yeah, but no one seems to be exploiting these old things anymore.
I run FreeBSD at home.
But we're protected from Log4j. There you go.
Yeah. We have code. We have code that's still 1.2. Like I have some unique perspective on it because I am a Java dev and I employ 2 Java devs, right? So it's like this is well connected to me. We have code using Log4j, so we had to fix code, and we're going through it. I'm like, oh man, we're still using Log4j 1.2. I didn't even know it was end of life until this whole thing came about. But which brings a whole like. We have vulnerability scanning for the dependencies we use, but those vulnerability scanners don't flag at end of life.
Yeah.
So do you remember I said something to you because we were talking about people that wanted to get into dev, right? Like anybody that got into IT 2 years ago, they wanted to get into programming. Now everybody that gets into IT wants to get into security. Maybe not this quarter or this year, but traditionally they want to get in security. And we were talking about like first languages used and that stuff like that. And my daughter went to she started computer science when she first entered college. And I said, why do they always teach Java? Like, what do I care about my application running on my Windows PC and my toaster? Who cares? And Jason said, oh, because this and this and teaches you this and this and this. And now that Java's everywhere, I got to worry about my CD player, having Log4j. So, I'm just saying, we don't really need this stuff.
The best is Ghidra. The thing that the threat researchers are using to look at malware is vulnerable to Log4j.
Yeah.
So you can literally craft malware that lets you take over the security researcher's PC, and that's pretty meta.
And I'm a Graylog user, which Graylog stacked on top of Elastic, which of course is vulnerable to it. So now my log ingestion platform can be my undoing.
Your attack service. Yeah. Well, what was it? ConnectWise Control on Linux is Java based, is it not?
It is, but it is not it's using Apache Commons logging,
right. But we didn't know that until like you started deep diving into it. So when this first happened, this was now Kaseya level event because the agents that were out there. This is do we need to call everybody to shut stuff off, or do we need to make 1,000 site visits?
Well, and I started calling that out and got told by the vendor to stop.
Yeah. Well, that vendor has told me a thing or two too. So. I love that. I love Ghidra. Thanks NSA for leaking such a great tool.
It's a good tool.
I use it all the time.
They dumped out there. It's become quite popular. So,
Jason Kyle saying from, and I was wearing my MSP Geek hat all day long today. But he was saying anyone who uses Java should be retired. I don't know if he's trying to tell you something specifically, or
it could be. Again, I feel singled out.
Yeah. And element, this is a misconception. And I see Grayson here posted about, to keep attacks as low as possible, avoid using applications. Well, we didn't know that before, and we don't know what's next. We don't know what egregious, unsanitized code is hanging out there that's going to be the next one. It's not, anything looks great in hindsight as 2020. And I've seen a lot of people, throw that out there, but any of these, you look at something like shell shock, it's not a Java problem. And there's always going to be something. We always need more code auditing. We need more people in coding. That's would be a better answer.
A burnout like answer to this is that like essentially this comes down to third-party risk management and supply chain problems, right? Like to take this into a language that people aren't going to make fun of, let's talk about JavaScript, right? Like if you install React, type React up to make yourself a website, and you've pulled in 400 node modules, 400. Any one of those node modules could have a vulnerability in it. As a matter of fact, in 2019 or 2017, somebody found an abandoned one on GitHub, re-registered it, and released a version of it that had specific code targeting one crypto wallet to steal cryptocurrency. Right? Like, and this is an event, it's like a 8th party dependency to like React, right? Like, no, so how do you control for that, right? It's like you want to talk about, well, I avoid software that uses Log4j. It's like, okay, do you avoid Spring? I mean, if you're doing Java, are you avoiding Spring? Because half the Spring stuff is bringing in Log4j.
And that was the thing, right? Like the thing that's been caught up now for the last couple of weeks is people talking about SBOM. And I would imagine many of the people watching this are like, SBOM, what the hell is SBOM? Software bill of materials, which is exactly that. It's if you've built that application, JavaScript or Node or whatever, having that list of packages with the list of versions, which is there. I mean, if you design the software, you have it. But how many application vendors say, this is what we have, and how many MSPs are qualified to say, start looking at not only the main application version number, but now all their sub modules and version numbers and all that. I mean, that is a monumental effort on its own.
Yeah. I'm still very for it because I think it helps get us an inventory. At least, does this product even use the thing that's in question? Because if it doesn't use it, great. I can just scratch it off the list quickly.
Just get rid of it.
Yeah, and just go. It doesn't even. It's not built on Java. Great. It's not even. Just throw that aside and don't burn it.
But I'll go back to what I said earlier. Graylog is going to tell you they use Elasticsearch.
Right.
They're going to tell you that Elasticsearch uses this and this uses that. I mean, I have a 13,000 line Java program that we maintain for one of our clients, right? This is one of the smaller components of this. It brings in 100 libraries, right? Like,
the vendor side, I'll push for the vendor side. When this first came out, my second message after messaging Jason was, hey, vendors, you guys need to put out a message.
Yep.
You guys need to like make the MSPs, because all the vendors that I'm friends with, we all serve the MSP and the IT community. Yep. We need to put out a we are or we are not very, very quickly. Not we're going to look into it and 16 days later we give you something. We need to give you that peace of mind. And for the record on the SBOM thing, I'm 100% for it.
Yeah.
But at a macro level, your RMMs can tell you what applications you have installed.
Yeah.
Intune can tell you what application. At bare minimum, you should know the main applications and what OS versions and that stuff you have installed. So you can at least look at that and say, when you have that, if it's a software that I can live without it, okay, fine. You find out that from the vendor, it may be, whatever. Or, like in Tom's case, right? And a lot of us use Graylog. But, then it's, do I shut down Graylog? Do I keep it going? You know what I mean? But have that decision made in advance so you don't have to do it while you're panicking. Because if you do it while you're panicking, you're going to make a mistake. And how many of these decisions you're going to have to make across your clients, right? Most MSPs have 10 clients, 20 clients, 50 clients. If you're one of those, like per desktop, you may have 1,000 endpoints you're monitoring. If you have to make 1,000 decisions, you are going to be burnt out. You're going to have liver damage and be emptying bottles of bourbon. Not saying I'm against that, but I'm just saying.
You should be doing it because you want to, not because it's the only way to cope with the security problems.
But syscontrol 2.1 is the thing.
I'll mention too, because one of the other big things that did happen here in 2021, it feels like forever ago, but it was the dependency confusion. That was a really interesting problem with our supply chain that was brought up, where we found out that we could publicly find namespaces that were internally named, and the pecking order was look externally for this particular library, find me the newest version externally, and if it doesn't exist, I'll pull the internal one. That basic order of pulling in libraries was really a crazy attack vector. It was, I thought, a really interesting write-up from earlier
that
this
whole
year.
supply chain thing, right? I mean, but that you have that with Orion was the similar issue, right? It was like they got into what was it, an intern uploaded or left a password open or some nonsense like that. There's been so many this year, it's just nuts. Like
that was 2020, man.
They're all blending together.
They're all blending, but that's the thing too, right? Like it didn't come out SolarWinds Orion with this issue. It was SolarWinds, and back then N-Central Enable was also part of SolarWinds, right? MSP Manager or whatever was also part of SolarWinds. So now it's all everything SolarWinds. Everybody's freaking, and plus every free tool you've ever downloaded to do an ARP scan or packet capture or looking at your net flow or whatever. And so all my SolarWinds stuff is broken, and that leads to tech burnout too. You know what I mean? It's frustrating.
It's I don't think you really work in tech unless you contemplate some non-technical job at least once a week. Like I could be a farmer or anything.
Oh, it's frozen banana stand, man.
Right?
Bananas.
There's always money in the banana stand.
I mean, one of my buddies like grows avocados in California in addition to owning an MSP, BJ, and it's like every day he's like, I could just go back to the avocados. I don't need this. Like, and I get it. I absolutely get it. Well, I'm the first one to tell you, like, you could not drag me kicking and screaming back into being an MSP. There's and I'm not saying you shouldn't be. I'm saying I completely get it. And my level of neuroses with my understanding of security, I'd have like most MSPs are like four of the 5 people are techs. I'd have like 9 of the 10 people are security people, and then maybe 1 billing person, and that would be it. You know what I mean? It's tough, man. My hat's off to MSPs everywhere.
Yeah, it takes a the intrigue keeps drawing me into it. You see this with anyone who's really in cybersecurity. I mean, how many hours straight were you up, Jason, working on how to completely weaponize Log4j? You were, I seen you post, like I won't sleep, and I'm like, Jason's still posting stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, so the Friday I rolled out of bed at like 7:30, went started seeing some things. Trying to remember where I saw it first. Started digging through things, was like, oh crap. We worked with Huntress, and so full disclosure, Caleb did 90% of the work on that tool. I had an initial POC that he used and provided some pair programming guidance when he got stuck, but it was almost entirely his work, and it was John's idea. John had been up all night working on it and had gone to sleep. We finally got the tool working and released at 12:26 a.m. Saturday morning, and I was up until 3 something, maybe 3:30 working on it again, and then was back up at 7 the next morning, right? So that was an entire week. I mean, I was at a conference earlier in the week. That whole week was like less than 6 hours of sleep every night, and it still continues, right? It's like my brain won't shut off, right? It's like we've got here's another way we could do it, right? I'm sitting on I think other people have done it now, so I'll talk about it. I'm sitting on a payload where I can full take over Java without ever spawning a subshell or writing to the file system, right? So
that was the terrifying part. It's watching John Hammond post these Minecraft pictures, and it's like, oh, I got this and I got this, and then seeing Caleb post stuff, and then seeing Jason. And every time, like, I walked away and I came back, I see Jason, oh, it's even easier than I thought. I can run it completely in memory. I don't have to install anything, which means it's not going to get caught. And I'm like, stop it. You're making it worse.
Yeah, to the vendors out there, if you send an email to me or somebody I know saying that you can beat your whitelisting, ring fencing bullshit marketing term thing. Oh, sorry. I was trying to not swear on this.
No, you come up that particular topic, bullshit's a good word for it.
Is gonna stop this, then I'm triggered, right? You talk about your soapbox, right? I am going to until my death, I will sit there hacking at something to prove that it's possible and that you're full of it.
I appreciate you for that, because that stuff looks alluring, right? Like And that really comes down to also like the MSPs. I consider myself security savvy. I'm smart enough to know I'm not a security expert, right? I have smarter people than me do that, and I surround myself by a lot of smarter people than me, like you guys. And so, but like I sit there and I look at this stuff, and when they say this tool would have stopped everything, that is very alluring to MSPs. And MSPs love the shiny stuff, right? Like I've never met an IT person ever that's like, you talk to 10 MSPs or 10 IT people, and 9 of those conversations were about tools, right? Oh, what AV do you use? What EDR do you use? What MDR? What OPP, UNITY, whatever. What do you use? And it's all tool talk. So when somebody says, "Oh, we could have prevented it," like,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? That's scary.
and it's almost a marketing ploy. I've always told, I've had this from even all the way down to the SMB when we're meeting with a client and they're like, well, the other guy that's giving us a proposal said he guarantees nothing will happen. I'm like, just walk him out the door. I'm never going to tell you that lie. I won't put that in writing. Well, he said, I said, good luck. I said, go with them if that's how you feel comfortable with. I said, I can't in good conscience just write like, I guarantee you'll never be breached if you use our tool stack.
Go tell him you're going to drop your cyber insurance then, because he's guaranteeing you're not going to get breached, and watch how quick he walks that statement back.
Oh, no, keep that insurance.
But like, that's the thing too, right? Like, and I think MSPs could relieve themselves of some of the burden. You talk to a security researcher, they'll tell you the same thing. There's no way to prevent it, right? I think one of the best analogies I saw, which is one of the Slacks, was, it's like saying you can prevent a hurricane. You can't. You can prepare for a hurricane, but you can't prevent it. MSPs, I think, generally understand that, right? I've never talked to a corp IT. I've never talked to an IT consultant or an MSP that doesn't understand. You can't prevent it. You can prepare for it. How many MSPs or IT professionals have talked to their clients and had that conversation?
Yeah, you're talking to a different group of MSPs than I am, because there are a lot of MSPs out there that are saying they can prevent it and truly believe it.
I wish I could see that.
Overzealous salespeople, man. I've heard. I can't believe I'm competing against some of them sometimes when they're like, "Well, the other guy said." I'm like, "Why would he say that? It's not based in reality." Like,
but that's an easy sell too. Okay, they're saying it'll never happen. They'll prevent 100%. Are they putting in the contract like they're going to cover your costs? They're going to cover your insurance premiums, and if something goes sideways, put your money in.
Limit of liability look like? Well, no one reads the contract, right? So it's like they'll tell you whatever they have to do to get you to sell, and then the contract limits their liability to basically a month's worth of service. And
right, that's force majeure right there. It's
Q South Park terms and conditions. I've agreed to a lot of things. I'm not sure what, but I feel one day it's all going to come back at me.
It's man, and like that's the thing, like. And there are ways to make this better. I mean, I can honestly say when I say I surround myself by people smarter than me, I'm not kidding. I'm in MSP Geek, and I'm in, IT Pool Party and MRU, and, a couple of different groups with these two gentlemen, and the Hunters people. And so when stuff happens, and obviously Reddit, and when stuff happens, I do use that because honestly, other MSPs, other IT professionals are very quick to share. It's not all going to be nuggets of wisdom. I'm telling you right now, much of it will be a dumpster fire. Where's your dumpster fire thing, Jason? A lot of it, but you can generally start filtering out what's important, what's not. When the Log4j stuff happened, we immediately jumped on. I started a thread, said start posting here and inviting vendors to say something. And people were saying, okay, well, vCenter's affected by it, and Elasticsearch is affected by it, and this is not, and this is not. And that central repository made it so much easier to go back and look. Surround yourself by those learning resources. And it can make it easier for you guys.
Yeah, and I threw the link up here for MSP Geek, and I'll also mention like Reddit RMSP, having these public discussions, because that way when one person says something, you usually find, just like we talked about earlier, some corrective replies, not just let me Google that for you replies, but some actual, so you can see the back and forth discussion to come to a common understanding of a best practice on a topic. So this participating community is really something I think helps with the burnout one. You're not alone. All of us are dealing with this at some levels. Printer Nightmare was called Printer Nightmare because it didn't just affect one person.
It's a recurring dream at this point.
It's a recurring dream.
Okay, so going back to that, you brought up a good point. being surrounded by others that have also felt your pain, right? Like when I worked at the police department, like the people that worked at PD with me, you had a certain understanding of the job that was different from anybody else outside. You knew, you went through these shared experiences. In the MSP groups, it's the exact same thing where, there was somebody talking yesterday or there was a post yesterday or this morning, I forgot when I saw it, where he was frustrated. They were frustrated because their client kept asking for immediate quotes and then refused to sign or kept disappearing whenever the quote needed to be signed so they get started. Everything was hurry up and wait, and that's frustrating. We've all been through that. That is super frustrating. And that person came back after a bunch of us gave advice, and he was like, they were like, actually, I think he did identify as he goes, thank you so much, I appreciate it. He goes, I was just frustrated at the time, I needed to vent, thanks for listening to me. And he goes, I already know what I'm going to do. So, which I'm assuming is fire the client and change your RMM. But but like the fact that you go vent to people that get you right, like that's an important thing. So I want to take advantage and call out while we're here, since we are the experts in how to handle this stuff. I guess I want to start with Tom. I'm taking over Tom's show. I want to start
Go ahead.
and then we're gonna go with the bamboozled beat. No, I'm kidding. Which we call it. No, Tom, first, can you describe a time where you were so frustrated you were seriously considering exiting IT? Like what led up to that, and how you handled it?
When I worked for other places, many times, the corporate BS of working in enterprise IT was very real and was very painful. I have a handful of friends that work at even Fortune 500 companies, and they want to quit sometimes because of the bureaucracy on top of the pressure for bureaucracy on top of that. So yeah, I've had a couple of those times. More so than when I worked for myself. The nice thing, in one of the reasons I end up working for myself, is so I can constantly be defining the parameters. And I've always had some good contracts and done well and had a diverse enough clients that if a client, I think that's usually where it comes down to, will taking on this client cause me grief? Or sometimes I don't know that until after I took them on. And I even have a video on my channel that's very popular called Why I Fire Clients Sometimes. And it just becomes a not worth it type thing of, I'm not starving to death. I'm not going to, it'll suck that I lose this client who may be paying me good money, but at some point my sanity is because I don't want to be that person that's trying to rage quit my own job, especially when I'm the one who runs the company. And, I try to really compartmentalize it. And matter of fact, we just turned down a very large bid because I realized some of the requirements in there were like, it was so great. Everything was so good looking with it, but dealing with the people, I said, the money I'll make on this is wonderful, but I'm not going to take it on. It's not worth the stress. It will be something that I know I'm going to feel terrible about. And so, yeah, it definitely happens from time to time, but I do my best to kind of compartmentalize it and just not take on something I think is going to kill me stressfully. That's been my one of the takeaways from running a business for 18 years, that where I'm at, it makes me so much more comfortable. I'll take less money for less stress. It's a better trade. I'm not trying to chase the most money over it. That's why I like YouTube so much. It's just easier. I just got to talk about it. I don't have to do anything.
What about you, Jay? What
I don't know. I don't know that I've legit considered leaving IT.
Well, hold on. You've done teaching, right? Yeah. You are now, right? The three of us are business owners. Like, you are now officially the president of your company. Congratulations on that.
A week from today, so yeah.
Yeah. But you're gonna tell me you've never been so frustrated you're almost at that level of like, I'm out?
I've been frustrated enough with IT companies I've worked for that I've been out, right? Like, I've definitely quit for like, this just isn't worth the stress reasons, or but I mean, much like Tom, for me, it's all about risk these days, right? It's like, I'm letting clients go because I don't want to deal with the risk, and I don't want to deal with the fact that, like, you don't want to spend any money to prevent something from happening, and you want me to drop everything and run and spend 24 hours a day on it when something does happen. It's like, I'm not the fire department. Like, I go find somebody else that wants to put up with that headache. I've often, and obviously you and I have had this conversation a non-zero amount of time. I mean, I've given serious thoughts to whether or not I want to be an MSP, just because of the stress that comes with that life, the stress of owning the risk of all of my clients. But I don't know. I love IT. I can't see myself exiting IT. I can see myself redefining what I do in it.
See, you guys kind of stole my thunder, so you suck because you're intelligent enough to have figured this out. When I started the MSP, I'm fortunate enough that this is my 7th business, and I know what I like, and I grew up with entrepreneurs, so I had a lot of lessons I had figured out for me before I even started making mistakes myself. But when I started the MSP side of business, I learned early on there were clients. I mean, within 6 months, there were clients I was just not going to do business with. I would rather not have the revenue than have the revenue and have the headaches that went along with it. And I've said that over and over. And that wasn't like I started the business and I had 10 employees. That was me. And then I hired my first employee at month 6. But I learned that when I was smaller, I had less time and I could not devote 100% of my time to a needy client that didn't understand and want to get to the shared goals I did. I'm not saying I haven't been frustrated over the years. I've absolutely, especially when the Kaseya stuff happens, or not that I was using Kaseya and nothing against them, but or like the VoIP DDoS stuff, right, where they took out bandwidth for a couple of weeks. That's absolutely frustrating, and especially it's more frustrating when you can do nothing. Like that stuff is mind blowing. But you learn to manage the stress, and that keeps you at a general happy place, right? I'll share when I was, yeah, exactly. If a client's for revenue you can't lose, grow enough to be able to lose it. I used to get scared when I had that big MSP client that was 20 grand a month, 30 grand a month, or whatever it was. And I was like, I need like 10 more clients to make up so that if they have to leave, I'm okay with it.
Yep.
I don't want to have somebody be able to put me against the corner
and me thinking,
yeah, absolutely. I don't want somebody other than me making the decisions for my MSP. I don't want the client making my decisions. So you'd make those little decisions, and it makes your life much easier where you can breathe. And I know I can already hear it. I can hear you guys. Oh, but if I'm just starting out, I can't afford to not take the business. I'm telling you, you can. You have less freedom. I can stop what I'm doing, go fly my drone, go play some Call of Duty, and then get back to work because I have a full staff of people that are doing business, taking care of things for me. When I was a 1-person, 2-person, 3-person shop, I was doing everything. And then I really didn't have time, much less for a needy client that was keeping me from going to make sales and going to other stuff. Your time is more valuable when you're smaller. So, when you grow, then you can dig around like Tom and Jason and I do, and stay on Discord all day or get on YouTube.
I hope that's a joke, or Richard is attempting to trigger you there with that statement.
I love that. You don't understand my market. My clients are different. Oh man, that's the running joke, right?
Yeah, and I'll address this right here. I'm a firm believer you only fire customers by raising rates until they stop being dumb or calling. It doesn't really work like that. As a matter of fact, my employees at one time, I remember they were like, Tom, we will all chip in a percentage of our paycheck to never hear this person's voice again. And I'm like, that's a good sign. You should probably fire the clients. I listened a lot to my staff in their interactions, but at some point, it's not even about raising rates. The fact that they can call you and that you'll even talk to them, as opposed to saying, sorry, I am just not the right fit for you. Because there's a satisfaction, because it almost is this constant abusiveness. And we've had a couple clients. I'm like, I don't know who deals with them now. God help them. But we're just happy they're finally not dealing with us.
Like I used to, when I was at the police department, I really enjoyed my job at the police department. I worked with really good people. I had really, I had lots of great friends that worked there. But I was miserable because of the bureaucracy. I was miserable because in any service-based business, and especially public service, when stuff goes sideways, you're working. That's how it works, right? If there's a hurricane, you're doing 24-hour shifts, or if not more. And so there was a lot of stuff that I was miserable that when I wanted to spend time with my family or whatever, I couldn't do. And I say this to all the people when I interview them and I hire them. I would say, I worked, and I would get up. I worked midnights by choice. I would get up at night and I'd have 10 reasons to not go to work. And I'd have to come up with a reason to go to work because of all the other stuff pressing down. So when I started this company and the MSP, the same thing, I said, I'm never going to make this business the business where going to work is going to be more stress on you. That's not going to, nobody's ever going to be like, yay, I can go to work now. Everybody has their own stuff going on in life, but I wanted to make it so that we weren't the additional pressure on you. We were a safe place to come work. So one of the things I instituted very early on when I was at MSP was I would let my staff nominate clients if they wanted us to fire the client, or there was a red flag client. Not that we would fire them immediately. We'd bring it up at a staff meeting. We discuss the pros and cons. We'd weigh the revenue. We'd have we replace the revenue. We'd actually look at the data, look at the tickets. Is there a problem person or is it a recurring thing? Have we tried to address it? We would look at it logically. But if we came to a consensus that client's got to go, that client went. It's staff first 100% of the time. And that made the staff much more comfortable knowing that I was always going to look out for them. That wasn't a question.
Yeah, I mean, I've had clients that are like verbally. I lost a client in a very public fashion. We shared a Slack channel with them. They were verbally abusive to my guys, and finally, I told the person there at that company, like, publicly, look, I'm not going to let you be an asshole. Well, sorry, now I'm swearing again, a butthole to my clients, to my employees. I publicly said that, and he fired us. And you know what? Life went on. And the stress of all those people that hated working with the guy and the unreasonable expectations and all the other things that came with it, they went away. And, it was a couple thousand a month in lost revenue. But in the end, that lost revenue, it wasn't worth losing the employees that he was verbally abusing for.
No, I mean, you have Stephen Spalding said it perfectly. People don't leave because of work; they leave because of management. I mean, if you have IT is already hard to begin with, right? Like, we're already a service business. They're already calling you when something bad's going on, even if you're doing QBRs and you do VCIO and all the other fun stuff. But like, they're calling you when something's broken. That's already, you're starting off on a negative relationship, even if they're a cool client. So, stuff happens, but if they're going to start berating you and they're going to start being a problem person, I'm not saying fire everybody. That's not my thing either. You can talk to them. There's certainly clients where I've had a person, one of their staff members, where I've said to management, like, look, this person's verbally abusive. I've asked them to stop. I need to limit their exposure. Either they go tickets through somebody else or they only communicate by email, but I have to make the decision. Either they tone it down and we figure out a workaround, or I have to let you guys go as a whole. And I don't want you to, but I will. And most management have always been receptive to that, to most of my clients. And they'll realize, if you have a good relationship, they don't want to lose you either. It's not like you're not putting them against the wall. You're saying, let's work together. And if they say no, go on. There's other clients. There's 7 billion people on the planet. There's there's millions of small businesses in the US alone. There's other clients out there. Don't sweat it.
Yeah, and it's a lot of just that triaging back and forth. We had a client that the owner was the one we had to avoid. And even the managers would kind of joke about it. We love dealing with the managers. Like, everyone at the company's nice. I'm like, how does this guy employ so many nice people? Because he's unpleasant. And they're like, yeah, he's kind of unpleasant here too. We like when he leaves. And I'm like, well, we don't like when he calls, because he would just go and, like you said, these weird tirades of calling people's names and stuff. And I'm like, we're just I told my staff, just hang up on him when he calls that way. And then the weirdest apology he ever gave when we threatened to fire him was, he goes, well, I was kicked in the head when I was a kid with a horse. And I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? Why are you calling my employees by name? Like, cussing at them. I'm just like, I didn't even know how to react to it other than to tell them, look, you can't call anymore. That's my answer. Either your manager calls or you just lose our number, or we'll fire you as a client. I don't know. But I don't even know how to respond to an apology saying I was kicked in the head by a horse when I was a kid. That was the only response, not like context beyond that.
I love Matthew Fox's most nerdy, geeky response to a bad client.
Yep.
No, but the Apache mod, A2EN mod, just replace their words with like nice words and problem solved. Or Jason's swearing. I'm usually the guy swearing. Replace Jason swearing with nice words.
I'm trying. I'm doing my best, but it's hard.
I mean, can somebody build a Lua mod so we can, replace bad speech? Right? Oh wait, not Lua. My bad.
Yeah. Maybe Java?
Maybe in
Java. There you go.
We could pipe it through Log4j and create actions on it. What could possibly go wrong?
Man, substitutions.
That's
a great idea. We should be able to substitute words in our logs.
You remember that hacker that was patching like open, I forget if it was OpenWRT or he was patching firewalls that had some kind of RCE on it.
Yes.
You remember that? And he patched a bunch, like, where's that hacker when we need him, right? Could he start like using like Log4j to patch itself? Like,
he had posted he had a Twitter account and he posted some anonymous stuff. He was calling himself like the internet sanitizer or something weird.
Yeah.
Like,
people got mad at him. Like, if he had a few people pissed off that he fixed he upgraded
Bricker bot.
There you go.
It was called the Bricker bot because he was bricking things with firmware. He was, anytime he found an exposed firmware, he wrote brickers for him that would just brick the firmware. He's like, they're never going to fix it, so I am.
Yeah, there's
Permanently.
I've
So there you go.
considered,
StreamYard doesn't have a 7-second. It does have a delay. It's different per platform you send it to. It doesn't have the beep though.
Oh no.
It doesn't
Yeah,
have the dump button. Um,
yeah, I'd be bad about pressing it. So
yeah, I'd be messing with people all the time. Like I'm the last person you want that to happen.
how long
So
do you guys
like,
have to? We didn't. I don't think we established that in the beginning.
oh no, I'm good till 4 or 3:34. I know it's 3:30 now, but
whatever. Yeah,
if
I'm
anybody
off
has,
today, so I'm just hanging out.
you're
Oh, you got a
becoming
promotion
president,
and
now
took a
you're
day
taking
off?
time off. Lazy man, lazy.
We had to finish Christmas.
Mm.
Yeah.
I have a 6 and a 9-year-old.
So did you take that opportunity to explain Java and Log4j and exploit anything or no?
No, but my kids like Minecraft, so the fact that it was a Minecraft exploit. So John Hammond's YouTube thumbnails are interesting enough. I think my kids would watch his videos just because of how cool his thumbnails are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of thumbnails, I saw you put my OIT cookies on one of your thumbnails from your vlog your vlog last week.
Those cookies were so
Did
good.
you send cookies again? Somebody sent
Yes.
cookies to the office and they weren't like named who they came from.
No, this had like OIT on the cover.
Okay,
of
this wasn't.
The tin had. Hold on, let me grab it. It's right here.
I know we sent to you, Jason. Like I know we sent to him.
They're probably somewhere. Somebody else sent us cookies. Yeah, I know those cookies. Those are good.
These are.
You know who didn't get those cookies?
Well, if they show up, I'll ship them back to you.
There you go.
Oh, along with the toe of
that
Satan
medium we sent to Matt over and over again.
Yeah, along with the toe of Satan.
Yeah, the toe of Satan. I'm not ready for that again. I know there's about 100 people in the live stream. If people have some cybersecurity questions and stuff like that, shoot away in there. We don't mind answering a few questions and things like that too. So.
Yeah, so I love John Hammond, but I can get sucked down the deep rabbit hole. So like that's my thing. Like I'll watch John and I'll watch and I'll watch some of his stuff. And I tried doing the Advent code. I did a few days or whatever. Like it is so far above my head. So it's like he says something and then it's pause and then I'm Googling for 35 minutes and then I come back. And I don't think I've ever actually gotten through a whole video of his, you know.
The Advent code stuff, I have the opposite problem. It's boring.
Well, when are we going to see your live streams, you know, hacking stuff? And
I don't know.
I've begged the Huntress guys and Jason too. He's like Huntress adjacent. I've begged these guys like open your incident responses live stream. I mean, you have to filter some stuff, of course, but like to see that inside process, like that fish tank.
Well, see, I've gotten invited to it a couple of times, right? So I have seen some of it. So it's fun. Burnout wise, that stuff doesn't burn me out, right? I get burnout on the business problems and the crappy clients, the cybersecurity stuff. I mean, if it happens all the time, I'll probably eventually burn out, but that's not what causes burnout to me.
That's a good question. There you go.
That's a really good question.
Too late to learn? No. There's a lot of people I think that start out late in some of the cybersecurity stuff, and I don't think that's an issue at all. Starting out late in there, there's a lot of people pick it up much later in life. The craziest thing is one of my friends, he worked in a factory, like automotive, different automotive level jobs, all the way up until he was about mid-30s. And he's now my friend who's managing 158,000 endpoints, managed your SIM and SOC team for a very large company. Like it's crazy. He just never thought of himself as a computer guy. And he jumped into cybersecurity side of it, did some college courses, got some intern jobs at a small place locally, and now works for a big nationwide company. And he says, I don't know, just kept clicking with me as he went up, and he loves his career and everything. So I would say, and like I said, I think he said he was 36 or 37 when he got started, and his entire previous, barely any computer, pretty much just worked in automotive, and that's it. Nothing technical background. He didn't switch from one technical side to another. So I don't think it's ever too late to do that.
Be prepared to hustle, right? Like, if you want to do it, you don't change because you think it's a good, easy way to earn money. Because if you're going to be successful, a lot of your educational learning is going to come outside of your 9-to-5 job.
Yep. You have to have a lot of passion for it, and he is at least, if there is a qualifier I will say about him, he's a little bit intense, and it is something that lends yourself to intensity is all the extra reading and things like that. If you're just looking for money, I've told people just work in finance or something. That's just money and things
Or
like
like
that.
my 8-year-old says he wants to become an anesthesiologist because they get paid a lot of money. They don't do a lot of work.
Yeah,
I'm like,
my wife is a pharmacist, and it's just a job, right? She's not super passionate about it. She said if she had to do it again, she'd go be an audiologist because it's the same amount of schooling, the same amount of pay, but they work office hours and never have nights and weekends.
Yeah. Now I had a curiosity here, and I don't know if you've had a chance to look at this, Jason. Are you familiar with how CrowdSec?
I am not.
So it's really slick. I have a friend who's dove into it. I set it up and played with it some. It's basically specifically for firewalling things like maybe WordPress or more public facing infrastructure on Linux. But they have a lot of plugins, and it's all open source, and it's all open source threat intelligence done in a really interesting way. And I haven't had a chance to really dive into it.
I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
Does it plug into like pfSense or something?
It plugs into anything. They got a long list of things it plugs into. Like directly, you would load it. Picture it working very similar to what's that blocking tool for too many logins?
Brute blocker.
Yeah, it's like that.
A ton of them. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's like one of those, but really interesting on the threat intelligence side. And the founders are someone who used to run, I think, over in Europe, a very large hosting infrastructure. And they started building it there. And they said, why don't we open source all this and have more people crowdsource this whole concept? It's really slick. I think it's a great idea. It's going to come down to, of course, like anything, how can they sustain it? They have a lot of systems in place to keep you from triggering like someone false positiving stuff or slamming it. They build up reputations with people and everything else. It seems really cool on the surface. I haven't dove enough into the technical details, but enough people, they have quite a few people using it.
My immediate thought is, how are they going to monetize this?
They want to keep it not monetized. They will monetize it by selling I think their business model is it's free for everyone, but if you don't want to participate, but it's free as long as you're participating in the model. So you are giving them threat intelligence data as well as taking it. But if you want to be a one-way street where you never give them any intelligence data from filtering, you can buy a feed from the crowdsource. I think that's their plan for monetization. He also has I listened to an interview, and I thought it was interesting that he doesn't really he's not trying to grow it into this constant, I'm going to go get a bunch of VC funds, run this until I have big enough clients, and then slap everyone with some huge buy. They seem to have more details. Like they don't want to do that. That's actually the problem they see with most of it. That's why they're building it without investors.
One of my first question for MSP tools is, what is your exit strategy?
Yeah. And they're an open source strategy. They're in everything open source. So it's a little bit different of a concept there.
Interesting. I'll have to look at it. That's kind of cool. Yeah, it looks like it's like a SIM, right? So it looks like it's collecting log data and then they're essentially processing it. That's cool. Neat.
Yeah.
I learned something new.
Hey, something else to poke at. How do you decide between commercially supported products versus open source? And me and Ray, we're going to do a video sometime, and maybe we'll include more people of how to vet the vendors. But being an open source advocate, the same question I'll ask of a closed source company: have they gone through a code audit? This is something that's very, if a product is through a mature life cycle, they're going to go through some type of auditing. And this absolutely applies as much to open source as it does to closed source. I think Bitwarden we've brought up a couple times as the way it should be done because they're so transparent with their code audits and everything they do. They have an entire wiki dedicated to each company. It even lists like what company audited, the results of the audit, links to the PDF files and everything else. A lot of it has to do with that. It's not like just because someone says, well, this stuff doesn't have a breach. I'm like, did anyone ever poke at it? Because sometimes you find out it's like because no one ever looked at the code. It's not that it's secure.
And when was the last code audit, right? Like,
well, somebody that goes through this stuff, right? Like you will find bugs everywhere, right? So it just no one's looked at it 100%. And audits are no guarantee either. So I have a different perspective on that question.
Sure.
It comes down to who you want to support it, right? Do you need to be able to call the vendor when it breaks, right? So I run CentOS because I'm never going to call a Red Hat because they're not the person, the level. I've been using Linux so long that like they don't have anyone that can help me, right? Like if it's to the point where I need vendor support on that thing, then the first 8 people I talk to aren't going to be able to help me, and it's going to have to be somebody that has access to the source code. And yeah, it's probably not going to do it. So, but VMware on the other hand, it's so complex and there's so many moving pieces that 100% of the case, even if they had open source vCenter, I'd probably pay for support on it.
Well,
So what are you going to do when CentOS goes end of life?
Rocky Linux.
Yep. And especially on the hypervisor topic, I'm a big fan of XCPNG. I've talked about it on my channel, and they're an open source product I like, and you can buy support. You can get it for free. Yep. And that's one of the other reasons for choosing them is they have very clearly laid out documented support plans. Like here's our plan. Here's your number of tickets are covered in this plan or what's our SLA agreements. They've got it very much. I like the way they did it because you go to the .org to get the open source version, and you go to .com, and it's the same version, but they let you buy the support contract for it. To make it very clear, our .com is our business side, and we fund it with all this. And Oliver Lambert's head of the team on there. And yeah, I like that business model that's available. And it's also a factor. I like Graylog. Also, Graylog's open source with a enterprise support package I can buy. So if you, the home lab user, want to play with it, go ahead. I got a whole video on it. Go ahead and download it. You, the enterprise business user, go, I'm ready for this. Okay, buy a license. Get the upgraded support, have them, they'll handle standing it up for you. Zabbix is another one I use. Same answer. Zabbix, get it for free, buy the support, or a lot of times just paying for the consulting to configure it. Zabbix has got so many knobs and buttons that it's a great tool, but it's a bear to set up. It's because of what it does. It's kind of an analogy for those not familiar with Zabbix. It's kind of like an RMM tool, but more for Linux. It can do Windows, but it's a great monitoring tool. Riley Chase, I told him he should do some videos on it. He's done a great job of integrating Zabbix. By the way, he also hired Zabbix for the level of integration that he has. He uses it to auto load balance and restart servers and give statuses of all of his HostiFi instances that he has for the UniFi hosting. It was a really easy integration because you can create actions items off. But there's plenty of open source products, and obviously Red Hat as a company is an easy example of you can have Linux or you can get Red Hat because you're not at Jason Slagle's level of understanding Linux, and you need that kind of support for patching and understanding and setting up products.
I can imagine Jason calls Red Hat and starts arguing with the guy because they're giving the wrong answer. So
yeah, or literally the one time at my last career, or the last job I ever called Red Hat support, I got to the second level. They're like, you need to restore from the backups. We had a corrupted LVM metadata, and I totally pulled it off the disk and restored it myself. I'm like, screw this, I'm not restoring this box.
That's some work. I am not an LVM expert. I can screw it up. That's when it works, it's fine. I just back everything up because for whatever reason, that's one of the little things in Linux that never clicks in my head. Well, I can do ZFS all day, but LVM is always a little bit.
Oh, I'm the opposite. ZFS is like black magic to me.
I love ZFS.
I love it. I usually use FreeNAS or TrueNAS when I'm doing that these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, building those servers. I think this is always a loaded question. And I actually like the fact that Huntress has addressed this in a very general way, that no solution will solve all of your problems. There is no specific endpoint vendor. And we all have our choices. We have because we like the product, because we like the dashboard, because we thought it was easy. Maybe the sales guy was nice. He sent me cookies. There's actually sometimes I almost feel like I can't always 100% because someone says, why do you like this product over the other ones? I said, there's not enough hours a day to check every single vendor on a particular one. I just chose this one because once I started using it, I felt like it clicked in my head and it worked. There's obviously, once you, I'm talking about more about the top tier vendors when you talk about endpoint protection. Like I like Huntress from the day I started using it. I said, hey, cool, this product works. I actually found it intuitive. I found working with the Huntress team great. And I also met them through their outreach of covering topics and blogging about security. That's what even let me, what are these guys blogging? Oh, that's a really interesting topic. Oh yeah, by the way, they make a cybersecurity tool. That's cool. That's kind of the arc of where it got me. And I've stayed with them because it's been effective and it also doesn't drive me nuts with false positives. So what's your thoughts on that, guys?
I said it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say that's the one we should use. No, no. I mean, so like
Yes,
going back to like
I'll agree with that.
but it installs on everything. It's like the Java of AV.
Yeah, it's on 3 billion devices 20 years later.
Exactly. But like that's one of the things I like. When I started this whole thing of like complaining about security guys that are unclear when they're talking, I think Huntress goes the opposite direction. I think they do an amazing job of saying like, do this, we're integrating with Microsoft Defender, but we understand these are the limitations, these are the this, not going and saying you should use this specific tool, because no vendor is going to say that unless they're me and they're stupid. But like, but they're very clear on what limitations are and what you should look for and stuff. And I think, what your qualifier should be, right? And I think when you're an MSP and you're not a security savant, that helps a lot. That helps to know, okay, well, even if Jason or Tom or John or whoever is not saying, I need to use this one tool, they're saying, these are the things I need to look for. And then I can go look for a tool that has those things. And that's more effective, in my opinion, because you're training them forever.
Yeah. Integration levels matter too. There's so many factors that go into it, because once you've started with one particular stack with your RMM, you want things that also integrate and tie in with the other tools you're using. So many decision factors.
Yeah, there are tiers, right? Like, at the top, I think you've got Sentinel-1. I think Sentinel-1 is complete. I don't think anything touches it, honestly. As somebody that's done AV bypass, but you pay for that privilege, right? So,
yeah,
then there's like the third tier ones. There's a bunch of them. I won't name them, and they're all roughly equally effective. And Defender is honestly in that tier 3 group, right?
Yes.
Like, and then there's like tier 2 and tier 1 vendors, right? So it doesn't matter. Just pick one that does well enough. I mean, we're talking a couple % detection between like tier 2 and Sentinel-1, right? So is it worth 3 times as much money to get like an extra 4% detection, or are you better off spending that extra money on something else that can allow you to get it some other way?
Well, you were saying Defender was giving you a hard time when you were trying to prepare for your.
Dude, Defender was hard. It was hard to get by. It's, it's somebody that does exploit development. Defender is like my nemesis right now, because man, it's all over everything, and it's deleting. And then I use a Dropbox or some sort of file sync to sync between the PCs I work on, and the PC at home is nuking stuff out of the stuff I'm working on here, and I'm like, oh my god, how do I stop this? And yeah, it's bad.
How crazy that the operating system vendor gives you like a complete way to protect the operating system they sell. Like, if only they would have done this 40 years ago,
It's crazy because they went from joke to not joke. Like it was the, it's just Defender, the integrated one. And they left that market space open, but Microsoft really has come the other way. And I'm hearing that, from a lot of cybersecurity people, that especially when they're trying to deploy something, they think, oh, I got this idea. I'm going to test a scenario. Let's set up a clean Windows system. And actually, when me and John Hammond were working on a demo, he didn't realize this when I set up the server, and I forget which thing we were trying to exploit. Me and him did a video together on exactly what the exploit was, but Defender stopped him, and it was hysterical. That he's like, this worked the other day, but you have Defender enabled now, it doesn't work.
I can't get it to turn off, right? Like I turn it off, and then it turns itself back on mysteriously, and it's
it's more persistent than the stuff Huntress looks for. It's
yeah. Oh, lots of fun there. People asking, I don't really do much with this. I see, people ask me like Grafana on some of the self-hosted dashboards. I never really get into those. I'm not a big, pretty dashboard person. I've even talked about when I use Graylog, I have a minimal amount of dashboards. Mostly I'm hunting for something there, because I'm like, how many JNDIs do I find in my logs and things like that? So I'm not a big, I don't know if either one of you guys use Grafana or any of those.
Yeah, it's cool.
It looks pretty. Don't get me wrong.
I have TeslaMate installed, and it uses Grafana on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, we use I used other commercial products before the MSP. We always had dashboards for everything. The dashboards we use now come out of Salesforce. They're not fantastic, but they do the job. I would love something more complete. It's just like so low on my totem pole for like priorities.
Yeah, I like for us, the same thing. We look at the RMM dashboards. We're looking at the action items out there. I don't bother to try and export it out. It's, look at things. As a matter of fact, before you really dive into what EDR should I buy, the bigger question is, what's patched? Is it patched? Like that's, I see people jumping all over. I think I don't know where it was, probably one of our discussions. We had something more along the lines of, I said, really focus on these endpoints first, because that's where the bad stuff is happening. Because I've seen people that think I'll just buy a firewall that'll magic all of this, right? That is
and then everybody goes to work from home.
Yeah.
We're also worried about the Log4j stuff, but like no one's really talking about the 2 Windows chain domain user to domain admin privilege escalation. That is arguably way worse if you don't have the November patches installed.
Yep.
Well, that's why it's the year of the Linux desktop. It's
Yeah, and it's quite the aggravation patching needs. At any given moment, if something's red in our RMA dashboard, it's almost always because we're waiting on the client because of their work schedule to get something rebooted after we loaded a patch. We, constantly in its servers, of course, and some of these escalation things, and we're trying to keep on top of those. That's actually where you end up spending a little bit more of your time as an MSP, and as you should keep these systems up to date. For reasons unknown to other than Microsoft. Microsoft does not put the effort I think they could, for the scale and scope of their company, into making these patches not require constant reboots.
Yeah, they totally could do that. They take the easy way out and say, rather than restart the process, that would allow us to basically write the file, right? Like rather than stop the service, write the file, start the service, it gets a access denied because file is in use, writes it to that like due on reboot log and flags that you need to reboot. Like, and that could be 90% of the time, unless you're updating the kernel. Like in even that Linux on Red Hat, I can update the kernel without rebooting in almost all cases.
Yeah,
that's kind of why I like Linux so much. It makes patching so much easier.
I have on all my Linux stuff, I have all the unattended upgrades, installing everything. I have it auto restarting services as needed. I just set that up. I've had some people, aren't you worried? Because like my forums and some of the other public things I have facing directly for me, I'm like, aren't you worried about breaking? I'm like, no, I would much rather have it for some reason Nginx didn't start on or my Docker container failed to start than, there was an egregious hole in the system and now Tom's forums are spreading malware. That's a way worse scenario.
You can packages too that you don't want to auto update. Like, as a service provider, we have certain uptime requirements. Like there are certain packages on purpose we hold when we're not auto updating, because we update those specific ones during specific maintenance windows.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Linux lets you do that. That's not that complicated.
Yeah, you have a strategy. Yep.
Yeah, it's very scriptable. So live patching kernels. Who knew we could get there?
Solaris did. Sun Microsystems did 20 years ago.
It's really weird to things like ZFS and all the other crazy things that come out of Sun. Like that was just such a think tank of smart people.
Yeah,
I'm
that
fascinated by that little collection of knowledge. Like we're going to design the file system that somehow you're going to be using 20 something years later. And that's a lot of forethought.
Yep.
They were some neat systems.
It's been so do you run it on Linux? Because it's like a third-party citizen on Linux. Less so these days, but it's like pretty. I run it on FreeBSD.
It only since they've switched it and all the more over my head legal arguments and debates that went on about that. Since they've moved to the 2.0 version, it's actually being developed pretty much in parallel now, I think, on BSD and Linux. That's what's allowing TrueNAS to do their TrueNAS scale. And that's going really well. They're in release candidate 2, I think came out today or yesterday for TrueNAS scale, which is going to be a game changer because they're pushing a lot of clustering into it. So they're using not Ceph, but the other one, Gluster. So you're going to be able to build your Gluster clusters
on top of ZFS.
On top of ZFS.
That's cool. Yeah, Gluster's a lot less complex than Ceph is.
Yeah, that's so I'm a reseller for 45 drives, and they're really big on Ceph clusters and things like that. So they've got all kinds of things they've worked on for that, because they worked on it in ZFS with Linux. Combined with, I think they're going to probably switch some things to Ubuntu, some things to Rocky, because everything was CentOS with them. But they worked with the, what is that called? It's the dashboard, the web interface. They're building web interfaces for it. It's built on, what's that Red Hat one? It's the Red Hat Web Management.
Oh, Satellite, Catello. Foreman. It's Satellite's the upstream version of, or the commercialized version of it.
Cockpit. That's
Cockpit. That's it. Yeah.
Yep. They've
upstream of that.
Yeah, that one is kind of neat, but they're starting to get into all that. And I think that's going to be being able to build these type of failable clusters, like I like that there's competing because we don't need a monoculture. It's funny, but they're both using ZFS underneath, but they're clustering. 45 drives is mostly Ceph, but it's going to be interesting because our new True Command product is going to be able to manage and scale out your cluster clusters and give you, redundancy across them for, and it's really targeted these companies because we slurp up more data than ever before. So now it's going to be.
We use FreeNAS for most of our Veeam repositories at the moment, and it's like I've got enough systems now that I've considered moving them to Gluster or Ceph on the back end just to get redundancy there.
Yeah, it's I'm excited to start diving into all that as it all comes out. So, and ZFS is just magic. I built that petabyte server in one of our new clients. I'm excited because they're expecting to fill it up roughly every 6 months with a petabyte with their amount of data they're producing. I'm like, awesome. So we're going to be back. So
is that how's that? So now we're completely the topic. It's like we're on Tech Bar. We're just so far off the rails we can't even see them anymore.
Oh yeah. Well,
how's the performance of that? That's been my one complaint for sequential storage. That stuff performs well, but I've had problems trying to do like random IO on it.
It's not bad as long as you start breaking out all the VDEVs enough time. So there's 60 drives in the cluster. So we broke it out into six separate ones. So we made them all 10 wide for storage efficiency. And that's 10 wide is fine with ZFS2. You can probably go up to 12 wide without a problem, but that's where you start. That's how you solve some of those issues. On that. That is always the debate.
Yeah, I'll do like 6 wide and then just stripe them together essentially.
Yep. So you can still get some decent random. I just did a whole series of benchmarks on that. There's not a lot of people doing as many benchmarks on those scalable systems. Me and Wendell from Level 1 are the only 2 people that I've seen posted on YouTube, and so it's been kind of been fun. It was Wendell. He, like me, we actually end up working with some of these very large systems of storage, which is just fascinating. The fact that we can store that much data.
Yeah.
Chris, where do you back it up to? I have no idea. They just keep it's.
Well, and then if you're using like 14 terabyte drives, it's like one fails and you're like, please don't die. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have them all on Z2, so you can hopefully re-silver without another one dying. But there's a risk. There's a pool risk.
Yeah, like all our Veeam stuff, it's like I'm maxing out at 8 terabyte drives right now, and I'm only striping 6 wide, but we're only doing RAID Z1. So
yeah. Is there any other questions people have here if we wind this down? So I know Ray's got to go soon, so we could talk forever and be off topic forever, but
I don't think we've ever ended at the time we thought we were going to end.
No,
you see that. I mean, I can just drive up and have a beer with you and look at all your cool toys if I want to keep talking. So
yeah, that too. All right.
Actually, you're both Tesla buddies. Actually, both of you guys drive Teslas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there's even a charger here. So if you drive here, you can charge at my office. So
yeah, we'll do one at the new office. So once we get our building built out.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for joining. And while you're here, if you're listening in post, even hit the like button. Helps the YouTube algorithm know that you like this content. So thanks everyone for joining. And hopefully we talked something about tech burnout in the beginning, wandered off into a few other topics. Hopefully you have a better understanding. You're not too old for cybersecurity. We need more of you in cybersecurity, so we're less stressed. If everyone was in security, like Ray said, if we could have 9 employees in security and 1 doing that, we need more of you. So
it would be 9 burnt out people and like the 1 billing person feel fine. Like it would still be.
It'd still be 9 people with their hair on fire. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
That's all right though. All right. Thanks everyone. See you next time. I've left in the description how to get a hold of these 2 gentlemen, connect with them over on LinkedIn or their companies and learn more about what they do. And thanks. All right. Awesome.
Thank you, man. Good. Thanks for having me on.
All right. There's the end button.